Today by talking about Boris Johnson. The Foreign Secretary has been speaking to The Guardian about one of the most high-profile and most contentious claims made by the Leave campaign during the 2016 EU referendum. Mr Johnson tells the paper that the original statement on the Vote Leave battle bus, that Britain sends £350 million a week to the EU, was wrong. The real figure is actually higher. He says the UK's weekly gross contribution would rise to £438 million by the end of the transition period after Brexit, which is expected to be in 2020. He acknowledges that the figure doesn't include the money we get back from the EU, but says we grossly underestimated the sum over which we would be able to take back control. Now, I'm sure this is grist to your mill, Anna, in some ways, returning to this figure that was on the side of the bus.
I know, I was getting so excited when you said that he'd admitted finally it was inaccurate.
Funnily enough, we wrote it just for that little build-up in excitement. So he actually says it would be more. Do you accept that the figure, whatever it is, and there have been arguments about net and gross figures, it's still a substantial amount of money that Britain would have control over?
No. People have been conned.
In what way are they conned?
I'm very surprised and disappointed in Boris that he's perpetuating these nonsenses. We know the figure of £350 million a week in itself was inaccurate because of the point you quite rightly make about gross and net. It doesn't take into account the money that we got back. But it's more important than even that. This is not going to be extra money that will be going to our NHS. People were conned about that, and I'm very disappointed that, given where we are, our Foreign Secretary, who holds, after all, one of the great offices of state, is not squaring up and being honest with the British public, and they deserve honesty as we leave the European Union.
Let's have a look at the figures, because you say he's not being honest about that figure, and there have been arguments about it, as we know. But actually, if you look at the Office for Budget Responsibility, it had a set of figures that it looked at, and it did say by 2021, the figures in pounds per week that the government would have control over would be £269 million. Now, that may not go to the NHS, but do you accept that the British government will have control over a sizable amount of money?
I don't know, because I haven't looked at these things, so I'm not going to say things, you know, that's where I mean, what you see is what you get with me. I'm not going to talk about things which What I do know is that this is not going to be additional funds that will go to the NHS, and that was an important part of the trick that was played upon the British people, that they believed that they would somehow get this money for their NHS, and that is not going to happen.
Why is it not going to happen? How do you know it's not going to happen? Because, let's say after transition,
well,
if Soubry, the government says, actually, we will put a lot more extra money and we'll take some of it out of the money we have control of.
Oh, well, that's a different matter. If this government decides that put even more over and above the additional billions of pounds that we have put in, so health spending is at record levels in our country.
But if they use some of that money that we would have control over...
Can I just finish my point? It's really important, this, Jo, because one of the things that people have, as I'm sure they are understanding, the reality of Brexit is that if we don't get a great deal, and I gravely fear that we will not get the sort of deal that we are being told that we are going to get, and in that event, our economy is going to suffer. And we know that we only get great public services when we have a great economy. So one of the strengths of a Conservative government is that we improve our economy. That means we've got more money to spend on public services. Brexit is going to hit us hard.
Right.
So it's really important that we don't give people false hopes and phony promises, as Leave did in order to win the referendum.
And that was during the campaign.
And Boris is still doing it.
Well, and he has revived this argument, but do you accept that there will be this pot of money that the government would have control over, and it would have the option, it may choose not to do so, but it would have the option of those contributions coming back under government control, of putting them in something like the NHS?
I do not believe it's as straightforward as that. And in any event, remember that already Brexit has cost us many billions of pounds because the government has had to put money aside in order to spend it to effectively deliver Brexit. So the reality of all of this, I believe, is dawning on people. And Boris is being irresponsible to continue to con people in this way. He should be honest about the challenges that Brexit poses to our country.
And do you think that's likely that he will stop talking about these things?
Sadly, I feel that that will not happen. I wish it would.
All right.
He's our Foreign Secretary. You know, this is grown up. This is proper stuff. He's got to man up to the position he holds.
We will come back to the issue of Brexit, surprise, surprise, in a few minutes.